Okay, continuing on the topic of autoimmune diseases, we're going to take a more in-depth look into one of them today. Last time we had a bit of a look into Graves' disease. In this one, we're going to have a look at systemic lupus erythematosus, or SLE for short. So SLE occurs when autoantibodies specific for DNA, RNA, uh, or other proteins associated with nucleic acids are produced, resulting in the formation of antigen-antibody complexes that target these nuclear antigens and damage small blood vessels, especially those in the glomerulus of the kidney nephrons, which you can see at the top right here. This kind of structure that you can see on the kind of top left, you can see it's labelled glomerulus. This within the Bowman's capsule, a massive condensed area full of small capillaries. These nuclear antigen and antibody complexes form complexes in these capillaries, and because they're so small, these complexes actually rupture the capillaries, causing tissue damage and damage to the functions of the nephrons in the kidney, and causing kidney damage because these nephrons, especially the Bowman's capsule, are extremely important for the process of ultrafiltration. And if you have rupturing of these glomeruluses, you can get larger molecules ending up in the collecting ducts of the nephrons. You should already know a lot about kind of nephrons from high school, so I won't go into too much detail about it here. You just need to know that in lupus, antigen-antibody complexes with these nuclear antigens are forming in the blood. The blood's traveling to the nephrons to undergo ultrafiltration, and within the glomerulus of these nephrons, the complexes are damaging capillaries, causing the glomeruluses to rupture and causing damage to the kidneys. So that's kind of one of the main medical consequences of lupus. That can potentially lead to death, because you can eventually get organ failure of the kidneys, which is not good. Although men and young children can be affected by lupus, women outnumber them 9-1. So the main people that actually develop lupus are women, the vast majority. Tissue damage that puts cellular debris like DNA, RNA, and histones into circulation can increase the likelihood of developing lupus, because you can obviously imagine this autoimmune disease is caused by T cells and B cells with antigen binding sites specific to nuclear proteins, so to nuclear antigens, escaping elimination, where they should be eliminated in the screening process in the thymus or the bone marrow or the lymph nodes. If we already have these T and B cells specific for the nuclear antigens in the blood, if you get some kind of tissue damage, like I don't know, some tissue damage that releases nuclear antigens into the blood, then these T and B cells are going to pick up these nuclear antigens and trigger a adaptive immune response, which is going to produce memory B cells, which are going to mean any time that you ever get these nuclear antigens in your blood in the future, you're going to have the production of more plasma cells that are going to produce more antibodies specific to these nuclear antigens. And that's why you kind of can get lifelong systemic lupus erythematosus from the initiation of the disease by tissue damage actually putting these nuclear antigens in your blood in the first place. So antigen-antibody complexes build up in the glomerulus of nephrons, like we talked about a moment ago, in the kidney, causing them to rupture, and this can lead to organ failure and death. This is also why one of the main tests for lupus, as well as an ELISA test, which I've done to determine prognosis of lupus, testing for anti-nuclear antibodies. You can also do urine tests to determine urine contents, because normally during the process of ultrafiltration, sugars like glucose and large proteins are unable to enter the filtrate because they can't enter the glomerulus because they are too large. So they don't actually enter the filtrate whatsoever. But when these antigen antibody complexes in lupus damage and rupture the glomerulus of the nephron, it allows these large molecules like glucose and large proteins to enter the filtrate. So then when you do a urine test, if you can find any of these large molecules in the urine, then you know there's been damage done to the glomerulus. And if you find this in association to other characteristics of lupus, like a malar rash and anti-nuclear antibodies in the blood from a ELISA test, then that increases your confidence in diagnosing the disease as lupus, as opposed to other diseases, which we're going to talk about now. Because if you do an ELISA test and you test positive for anti-nuclear antibodies, that does not necessarily mean that you have lupus. So symptoms for lupus include a butterfly rash, which you can see in the bottom right here, fatigue, arthritis, anemia, seizures, nausea, and many more, like light sensitivity. Because UV radiation can cause damage to cells, releasing anti-nuclear antigens into the bloodstream, leading to a lupus flare-up, where you get more of these anti-nuclear antibodies being produced, forming complexes and damaging tissues through the complexes accumulating. Blood and nuclear tests can be used as well as anti-nuclear antibody tests. But it should be noted that here on the top right here, you would do a sandwich ELISA, which I have done. And if the substrate gets broken down and you get your color change, if you don't know stuff about the sandwich ELISA, I don't really have time to go over it in detail here, but we go over an ELISA in part 1 of the immunodiagnostic techniques videos. But you just need to know that the antigen, the little orange ball shown here, that in the case of a sandwich ELISA for lupus, that would be an anti-nuclear antigen. If you test positive for these anti-nuclear antigens, indicated by a color change caused by the substrate being broken down by an enzyme linked to the secondary antibody on the ELISA, that even though you test positive for the anti-nuclear antigens, that doesn't mean you have lupus, because a lot of autoimmune diseases have test positive for these anti-nuclear antigens. Sorry, I got a bit confused there. That's not actually the case. You're testing for the anti-nuclear antibodies for lupus, so you use an anti-nuclear antigen that you already know, and then you're testing for the anti-nuclear antibodies. If you have these anti-nuclear antibodies, that does not necessarily mean that you have lupus, because they're found in a lot of autoimmune diseases. So that's why you also have to do stuff like blood tests to compare symptoms. So all lupus patients will have positive anti-nuclear antibody tests, but not all positive anti-nuclear antibody tests mean lupus. Lupus mimics other diseases and lacks a definitive test, so there's no one task to fully diagnose lupus. Currently, there's no cure, only measures taken to avoid flare-up.